or maintaining larger garrisons. Joseph Stalin's Red Army had gone across Eastern Europe as it did and seized Berlin unaided, but by 1947 avoided the division of Germany and produced a united communist German Democratic Republic. That's a very interesting twist on the Cold War. The NATO alliance would have been severely weakened. Could France have fallen to communism too? So the Cold War could have been a time of Soviet containment of the United States rather than the reverse. And if America had still developed the atomic bomb, that may have been the only thing preventing an invasion. By the 1960s to the 1970s, the CSA probably would have been under the same forces affecting European powers who saw their colonies collapse and disappear and gain independence, when the idea of having direct economic and political control over another land was quickly losing support across the world. What we call the civil rights movement today could have been far bloodier and armed and looked more like a revolution. Many of the presidents that were part of our timeline probably wouldn't have been elected, especially if you think of all the Southerners who were presidents. There'd be no Lyndon Johnson, who's from Texas, or Jimmy Carter from Georgia, or Bill Clinton from Arkansas. But Johnson, I think, in this alternate timeline, would have been a major politician in the CSA since he was a born politician. The political calculus of the 20th century, the Southern strategy, wouldn't have existed. Foreign policy in the United States would be profoundly different in the 21st century if the CSA still existed. Without clear military successes of World War II and the Cold War, and the strong self-assurance that developed America during the 20th century, America would be a smaller place in territory, but also in aspirations. Both the CSA and the USA would seek to be a regional power to influence its neighbors, but by no means a superpower that is in the 21st century in thinking in terms of global policy. The United States perhaps might be even more moralistic in its foreign policy if it lived next to an oppressive and discriminatory state for over a century, but much less able to impose its vision around the globe. So here's a final thought with this. The American Civil War was a destructive experience for the United States. More Americans died in that war than any other war it fought in. In the 21st century, many Americans regret its excesses, such as General William Tecumseh Sherman's brutal burning of Atlanta, the March to the Sea, the destruction of crop fields, the destruction of railroads, and everything else that he did, having a scorched earth campaign. But at least as we understand the Civil War, in the United States, we see it as a good thing that ended the scourge of slavery that bedeviled those who wanted to abolish it since the beginning of the United States. And it was terrible, but ultimately it allowed the U.S. to undo its absolute worst institution from its beginning. So there's an understanding that the Civil War was a bit of a necessary evil. But if the Civil War had ended worse, then that probably wouldn't have been the outlook in the United States, and we would have seen it as the sad fracturing of what happened to the U.S., whereas in Germany, few would see the split between East and West Germany as being a good thing. In the United States, amongst different foreign policy hawks, there are those who have supported civil wars in other nations, hoping that the quote-unquote good guys win and the long-term trajectory of the nation can be put on better footing, the way that the United States was. But had the USA and CSA split, then perhaps that type of foreign policy interventionism wouldn't be as popular as it is now. So it's very hard to imagine what would happen in the Confederacy of one. But all in all, I have to say, this is not anything shocking. It would not have been good. So there's my controversial take on the issue. Well, that's all I have for today. There's probably a million other things that could be said, but I think this is a good stopping point. First off, I want to give a shout out to the Spy Masters for the Knowlton's Rangers. Vic Austin, Chris, Rob Matlock, Alan Baker, Beverly Ingle, Jake Harrington, Todd Warren, William Ivey, Joyce Normant, Tyler from Colorado, Josh Reddick, Daniel Lawson, Marlene, Michael, Tim Clark, David Powell, Moondoggy from Ohio, Melissa, Christopher Main, Carl from Norway, and Baron Fraser. I'll explain what that is in a second. If you like the show and want to help it grow, there are 4 easy ways for you to do it. 1, like and subscribe to the show on the podcast player of your choice. This helps spread the word about the show. 2, join our Facebook group. Here we can keep the discussion going about new episodes, and you can talk about what you like and didn't like. And you can find this group if you just search for History Unplugged on Facebook. 3, we have an online store with t-shirts, phone covers, and other accessories featuring awesomely bad history puns that were crowdsourced by you, the audience. And you can find that if you go to public.com and look for History Unplugged, or you just go to historyonthenet.com and look for our store there. 4, and this is really the best way to dive deep with History Unplugged, and that's to become one of the Knowlton's Rangers. If you know your American history, you know the Knowlton's Rangers were an elite spy and reconnaissance group in the American Revolutionary War, but it's also the name of the membership program of History Unplugged. You can join at 3 levels. If you join at the level of Scout, you can hear all the episodes of History Unplugged completely ad-free and get early access to new episodes, at least a week early. If you join at the Intelligence Officer level, you get special bonus episodes, like a 10-part series on the World War II hero Audie Murphy, a multi-part series called Ottoman Lives about different people in the Ottoman Empire, and a series called Rendezvous with Death that looks at biographical profiles of Americans who went to fight in World War I before America entered the war. The last level is Spy Master, where you get all that stuff, but you also get 3 hardcover history books, Forging a President, How the Wild West Created Teddy Roosevelt, Race to the Top of the World, Richard Byrd and the First Flight to the North Pole, and The Last Fighter Pilot, the true story of the final combat mission of World War II. Another bonus is, you can choose a history topic for me to focus on for an entire episode that can go up to an hour, and I'll answer whatever question you have for me, and you get a shout out at the end of each episode. If you want to learn how to become a member of the Knowlton's Rangers, go to patreon.com/unplugged. That's patreon.com/unplugged. All right, well, that is all for my spiel. Thanks for listening to the History Unplugged podcast, from ancient Greece to the Cold War and everything else in between. See you next time.